Slasco here, look. Minister, before you arrived here this morning at the order of business, I frustrated the order of business because of this bill. And I did it deliberately. I did it because I'm a legislator and I'm a member of this House, and like Senator McDougall said a short time ago, we are here to look at legislation, to analyse legislation, to propose amendments to improve that legislation. To bring second stage in today and all other stages in next Thursday, for me, is repugnant to that. I know you don't make those decisions, but I think it's important that that's said today. I then had an accusation thrown at me that I had joined the pro-life crowd. I know nobody in this world that's anti-life, so I reject that statement out of hand. I compliment you for bringing this forward. It's time that we had legislation. Long time. Senator McDougall made the point 10 years ago. He took the case on behalf of the AG. So I have no difficulty with the legislation coming through. I know that in my life, surrogacy was a slightly different thing insofar as large families, sometimes a sister or a brother would give a child to a sister or brother who couldn't have a child, and it was perfectly acceptable then, and I see nothing wrong with it now. I also see absolutely nothing wrong with a relation being a surrogate for a sister who's in difficulty and cannot have a child for whatever reason. I do sort of qualify that by saying we all must accept none of us have a right to a child. A child is something, a blessing that comes to us if we're lucky enough. And I'm fortunate enough to have 2 children and 3 gorgeous granddaughters that I love dearly, right? And I think that's something we should never try to deny anybody. There are difficulties in the bill. There is specifically in the area of surrogacy. And in coming here, before I spoke here, I had a look on the web, and certainly from my perspective it looks like surrogacy is something that's available to the wealthy and not to the poor, and that is simply wrong in every sense of the word. International surrogacy really bothers me. I see strong regulation in the United States, but I mean, yesterday I was looking at advertisements from Ukraine, from Georgia, 65,000 euros, to me, great. 65,000 euros, if I wanted a child that badly and could afford it, I would go for that. But these are agencies that are setting up these 65,000. How much goes to the unfortunate woman who carries the child? It was suggested to me, well, 10,000 euros would be an awful lot of money if you lived in that country, and wouldn't you be delighted to get your hands on 10 grand? What happened to the other 55 grand? That's what I want to know. So we can regulate all we want here. We can't regulate what happens outside our own jurisdiction, and that is going to be a problem. The issue of birth cert. I think I'm mindful of 2 children that were adopted at birth who asked to meet their birth mother. And in one particular case, the birth mother had always grieved at that she gave away that child. And having got this request, she was delighted. She went and had her hair done, bought new clothes, delighted. Met her daughter in a restaurant in Galway, and her daughter sat across the table from her with a notebook. And when she went in, she expected to give her a hug. There was no hug coming. And the young woman sat down and she said, right, you're my birth mother. She said, yes. Okay, I have a number of questions for you. And she started asking health-related questions. And when she finished, she closed the notebook, stood up and said, I don't ever want to see you again, ever, and walked away. And the devastation that that left behind. Remember, the generation that I lived in, these girls didn't have a choice. They were sent to mother and baby homes. They were disowned by society, run away by their own families. Now, I do have a slight difficulty with where we're going with international particularly. Are we building up cases in the future where this state will be held liable by those who have been denied access to the woman who bore them and brought them into the world? There is a certain amount of exploitation that's taken place here. And that exploitation, we're talking about countries where people earn very little money. And the thoughts of making a big killing. Is there coercion involved? I remember one time in a particular job I had, we had the unfortunate task of ferrying young women from a gate to a ship. And we know what they were going to the ship for. And I remember one time a husband and father bringing his wife and daughter out to leave them on board the ship for the use of the sailors, and collected them 2 days later. So coercion happens all the time, and where men are involved with women, there is always an element of coercion. So how do we protect surrogate mothers? That's my issue. How do we protect those women that will carry a child into the world? I'm delighted for those who are able to afford the surrogacy and get a child out of it and love that child. There are other issues as well, other moral and ethical issues. When the child is born, if there's a deficiency or a disability, do they still take the child, or do they say, sorry, that's not what I contracted for? So I am deeply, deeply moved by this bill. I'm deeply concerned by it. And I would really like that we had more time to debate the issues in this House without some of the emotion that I've heard, some of the insulting behaviour coming back and forth. We're all honourable people trying to do our best. Thank you.
Thank you.